Welcome to the New York Energy Week Opening Ceremony. My name is Emily Bjorklund. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at EnerKnol, the company behind New York Energy Week. On behalf of the entire EnerKnol team, I want to thank you for joining us here this evening. It is a unique and humbling experience to have so many leaders from every sector of our industry from all over the world here in a single room to kick off New York Energy Week 2014. We are truly honored to have you here. Before we continue, I'd like to invite you all to join into the discussion on Twitter using the NYEW hashtag, and to please also download the New York Energy Week mobile app. For those of you we haven't met yet, EnerKnol is an energy information company based here in New York. We provide energy policy research and data, energy market participants from all sectors. We launched New York Energy Week last year to stimulate collaboration and investment in the often fragmented and siloed energy industry. It is the only series that offers a single platform for all stakeholders in the energy industry to come together and foster the connections and conversations necessary for our industry to innovate. Last year, nearly 2,000 energy professionals participated in our inaugural year. We are pleased to say that we have double that number this year in the 12 headline events and 20 affiliate events happening this week. New York Energy Week is more than just 5 days out of the year. It is a year-round collaborative initiative that would not be possible without the partnership and support of many industry leaders here in this room. I would first like to thank our founding partner, NYSERDA, our brand partner, the Energy Agency, this year's Terawatt sponsors, Breitling Energy and Con Edison. Con Edison's leadership will be highlighted throughout the entire week, but it is especially evident this evening by having all of you, the leaders in the industry, here at their headquarters. I would also like to thank our board of directors, especially Kate Burson, who brought New York State's progressive new energy vision to tonight's panel, our steering committee, Deidre Miller and Megan McAvoy, who served as co-chairs of this event, our esteemed panelists, and our moderator for this evening, Jessi Hempel from Fortune magazine. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to thank and introduce John McAvoy, the president and CEO of Con Edison.
Thanks so much, Emily. Thank you all for being here. Good evening. I will tell you it is our pleasure to have you join us here at our corporate headquarters for the start of New York Energy Week 2014. Con Edison is proud to be a sponsor of New York Energy Week, and we're pleased to have the opportunity to host this opening ceremony. Briefing all of the various stakeholders together in this way, we feel will really spur greater collaboration between us at a time when the issues of innovation and change in the industry are top of mind, and very much in the headlines as well. Put simply, New York Energy Week provides a great opportunity for us to learn from one another. Through this format, we can share our knowledge while celebrating and showcasing new ideas for the way forward in the most dynamic city and region in the world. Ultimately, the week-long program will help drive forward important investment in New York's economy. Also, on behalf of Con Edison, I'd like to welcome Public Service Commissioner Chair Audrey Zibelman, John Rhodes, President and CEO of NYSERDA, Alfred Griffin, the President of the New York Green Bank, Gil Quiniones, the President and CEO of the New York Power Authority, Ken Daly, the President of National Grid, and Angelique Mercurio, the founder and CEO of EnerKnol. Thank you all for being here and joining us this evening. And Angelique, special thanks for you and all the hardworking people at EnerKnol for their great efforts in putting this week's program together. We know it will be as interesting as it is informative, and I'm confident that it will help us focus on finding solutions for the customers we serve. Once again, welcome to our headquarters. I hope you find this week's enjoyable and enlightening. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'm Jessi Hempel. I'm a writer at Fortune magazine where I head up our technology coverage. And, you know, as someone who spends most of my days thinking about technology and innovation, I'm excited to have this conversation because the very themes that run through my reporting are the themes running through this industry right now. And as you guys prepare for a week of rich dialogue and conversation about this, it's a great way to kick it off. So thank you, John, for introducing the panel. We are going to spend about a half an hour conversing among ourselves, and then I'm going to open it up to all of you for questions. And I'm going to start with a big, broad question, and I'm going to direct it at Audrey. Audrey, what is REV, and why is New York reforming its energy resolutions?
Thank you, and thank you all for being here, and to EnerKnol, and also, are we on? Yeah, Con Ed for hosting this night. So let me it's hard to say what is REV in 10 words or less. I'm going to have to use a few more. So
you can have 12.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take more than that. This is my chair initiative. You start off with the principle, and it will always remain a constant. In order for our society to really function, we need electricity to be affordable. We need it to be reliable. We need the system to be resilient. And what I mean by that is, in our post-Sandy experience, we all realize this, is that we need the system. We know there will be storms. We need to be able to respond quickly because we all need reliability and we all need electricity. And we all need to look at how do we do this in such a way as to minimize environmental impact. And that's sort of all the goods that we recognize are critical and really can't ever go away. The issue is how do you achieve those goods in the new environment? Traditionally, we've always looked at, we do this in the utility industry, thinking about building power plants, the most efficient power plants, as getting renewables in, and then delivering them to customers, and customers being pretty passive members of this equation. Moving forward, what we realize is that technology allows us to move from a grid where the customers are somewhat the passive and just pay the bills at the end of the month, to really the active members, where consumers are in a position not only to choose who their suppliers are, but actually to choose how much they consume and what they consume. And what they're probably lacking is the information necessary to make these informed choices, the tools to get there, and also the market mechanisms that allow them to actually see the value that making these decisions not only help them manage price, help them address maybe their environmental concerns, but actually becomes the economic choice for the grid itself. And so that became somewhat of the challenge that we're looking at. And what we realized when we started REV, that this is not a single issue topic. There's a multiple of issue things that need to change. And so we looked at coming up, and that's what the REV docket is really a comprehensive approach to saying a number of things have to be affected in order for us to be successful. So one was as a vision, and the basis of the vision, and I actually give it credit to my colleague here, John Rhodes, who articulated it in a discussion we had, and I said, this is it, is that we need to make sure that clean energy is no longer seen as the periphery of how we manage the energy grid, but it's really central, and how we do energy efficiency and clean energy has to be core to the operations of the system. We need to think about how do we make that core. So one is recognizing that the function of the utility definition itself needed to change. So rather than thinking about the distribution utility as the wires company, is really thinking about the distribution utility as the integrator of these distributed energy resources. And when I'm talking about this, it could be rooftop solar, it could be storage, it could be the ability, your Nest thermostat and your washing machine that reflects a price. It could be anything that you could use to actually manage your demand. And the role of the distribution utility is almost like creating that intranet of things, of creating the capability for these resources now to act in concert so that we can manage how we use electricity in a way that it makes a much more efficient system. And so that the role of the distribution utility has to be more around integrating these resources and seeing them as a solution rather than seeing them as a problem. So that was one aspect of REV, is really changing that. In recognizing how to do that, we also know we have to change the customer perception. We have to really engage customers in seeing that the ability to manage energy is a pull, is something they want to do, and we want to animate markets about that. So for example, my best example is where I'd like to change this industry. When Apple is introducing a new product, everyone is so excited, they don't even know what it is yet, but they're still lining up to buy it. And so how do we get the electric industry into the same position when people say, I don't know what that Nest thermostat is, or I don't know what that really cool device is, but I want it because my neighbor has it and it's really cool. I went over their house and they're using it and I want the same thing. And not only that, what they told me is because they have this device, they're paying less for electricity and they get this little plug at the end that because they're a green customer, they get this huge value add, and I want one of those. And that's what we're trying to move it to, is really getting customers engaged so that they're a pull as opposed to us having to push ideas onto them. The other thing, though, we realize is that another big piece of REV is you really need to change then the utility regulatory structure. And a big piece of what we're looking at is moving utilities from where they are today. And New York's made a lot of progress. We've restructured the industry. Our distribution utilities have a number of different programs so that they have no negative impact from running energy efficiency programs and things like that. But we need to move away from utilities thinking about clean energy as a nice thing to do, is really something that's of value to them as running these businesses. So it's really changing the whole regulatory construct of saying, rather than having distribution utilities even neutral, we want them economically positive. The more efficient they make the system, the cleaner they make the system, the more innovation they allow in the system, is that they're economically rewarded, so that itself becomes an outcome, because what we know is when the system is more efficient, the price goes down for everyone, and if the utility can help us get there, why wouldn't we reward them? That's exactly what Wall Street does when a company is more productive. So it's really changing regulation, which today tends to be more input-based to outcome-based, where we really think about how do we align the utilities to what we want to see in society. So what we're doing in the REV docket is really ambitious, but we're New York and we're ambitious, is we have a collaborative. We're asking for a lot of the ecosystem, not just the traditional ecosystem of utilities and customers and interveners, but vendors and people who are really part of creating this new future is to come with us in collaboratives and think about what are some of the fundamental changes that need to happen, what are basically the technologies that are available, and how do we move this forward. With the idea is that by the end of this year, this commission will come out with a number of pronouncements around the direction we're heading, the requirements that we're going to be asking for from the utilities, some very basic policy decisions about the vision for the future. And then by the second quarter of next year, we're really in a position where we're asking utilities to file plans that really execute on the vision. So where a lot of folks tend to look at, let's see how much solar we want, let's see how much energy efficiency we want, let's see how much storage we want. What we're saying is, how do we create a much better, much more efficient, much more customer-oriented system? Because we believe that fundamentally that's the economic choice as well as the environmental choice. And in our world post-Sandy, we know what the effects of climate change, and we can't afford to do business as usual anymore. So that's our burning platform, and really part of REV is to really get us all going there.
So Audrey, that's a tall order. You want me as a customer to want you as much as I want my iPhone, and to need you also as much as I want my iPhone. No pressure, guys. Let's delve into that a little bit. So moving on, let's see. How are the traditional utilities adapting to these changes? And I'll start, Ken, with you on that.
Yeah, I think in a word, we're excited. I think there's a perception that, for whatever reason, utilities would be resistant to this type of change. It's actually quite the contrary. We're fortunate in that our systems and our model has withstood the test of time. Having said that, it's very clear in just the last year or two, things have changed. If you look at the increase in renewables, if you look at the frequency of storms and the intensity, go back to Sandy. We've been running the gas networks here in parts of New York City and Long Island for over a century. If you add up every storm in that 100-year history, on a cumulative basis, it was less than what we saw on Sandy. So in a single night, in 8 hours, we saw more impacts to our system than we had in a 100-year history. Clearly, climate change is real. I think as utility leaders, we take that as an opportunity. How can we build our systems better for the future? it really does have to start with reliability. And I think one of the things that gives us real confidence in our role is the key to whatever the future holds is a very, very resilient backbone, whether it's the gas grid or the electric grid. And then once you have that, you have far greater capability, again, whether it's renewables, whether it's animating markets. It really allows other players to then come into the utility space to work with us, to work off our grid. I think there's models, not just here in New York, but throughout the country. Later I could talk about some of our experiences in the United Kingdom. But we think the key is having a strong backbone, making the investments on the front end, and then really creating a marketplace where there's partnerships, where there's innovation, and then new players and helping design, the iPad of the future, if you will.
What would you add to that, John?
Well, I'd say in many respects, it's a continuation of a lot of the work we have been doing, but it will let us take it to the next level. We've had energy efficiency programs for many years. We've invested over $150 million just in the last 5 years. We've had demand response programs in addition to the NYSO's demand response programs going back a decade plus. Our energy efficiency efforts actually go back to the 70s. And so we've always put a focus on how can we help the customer use less and reduce their bills. What's exciting about this, though, is that it really does promote an opportunity to take it to another level. And we see the customers are interested in that and they want that. And we see our role is helping to facilitate and integrate that. And we think we're in a really good position to do that, and in a way that will add value to what the customers want to do. If we can bring to them the facts, help educate them, and share information so that they can make their own energy choice decisions, we want to be there with them to help facilitate whatever decisions they do make.
So what is the role, and this is a question for anyone who wants to take it, what do you see as the role of the competitive energy markets in the future? New York State and some utilities are opposing the actions of the NYSO. The courts are opposing actions FERC is taking to encourage demand response. How do we move forward?
Let me take that first. Actually, I think the best way to characterize it is this: is actually New York is really promoting competitive markets. One of the things that's most important to us is looking at it from a regulatory agency. New York has the 4th highest electric bills in the country. We're fortunate in that we're very efficient users of electricity. In other words, we tend to, we don't have the mega mansions and things like that. And so that may not show up in the bills, but we really are looking at everything we can do to make sure that the cost of electricity goes down relative to where it would have been. In other words, we become very efficient. One of the things that markets do is they provide information and they allow for innovation and they drive efficiency. And one of the things that when you see New York oppose things, it's because we're feeling like we're spending consumer dollars and it's not producing any more of a value. But where you have markets really operating and where you can have competitors come in and innovate, that's where you can actually get real value. And our goal in looking at REV and when we look at even how the wholesale markets work is really to create those efficient markets so that consumers have the information they need as well as the innovators and the data they need to provide really efficient services and service offerings, and that those offerings actually get truly valued in the markets. And what we look at is eliminating barriers to that kind of innovation by market structures that actually, rather than heighten the value, really take value away from consumers.
So Audrey, one thing I'm hearing you say is that by fostering competitive markets, you're serving the consumer, that those tensions ultimately serve the consumer. Is that right?
Right. I mean, and I think we've seen in the wholesale markets as a whole is that competition has brought true value to New York, and that prices through competition, and even in the wholesale markets, have gone down relative to the states that never went to markets. And so there's no question that markets provide value. The issue for us is making sure that the markets at the retail level are just as robust.
Right. What's the role that clean startups can play in this? And then I'll throw this one to Angelique.
Sure. Well, it's very, very exciting to see from startups because innovation is actually required to really meet a lot of these big goals and plans of REV. And for us as a startup in the Acre Incubator, we're already seeing it happen. Both National Grid and Con Edison have been in the incubator several times over the past few weeks, meeting with some of the different companies, and we're a data software, but they have tons of innovations being built out of the incubator, on the hardware side as well. And Ken was in there, I think, twice in the past couple of weeks, looking at companies that are saving heat, saving, a quarter of all of the heat in New York City, of steam heat, using off-the-shelf technology, and companies that are also being imported from the UK, for example. One company has been around there for about 5 years already, but is now developing the same technology here that is saving over 80 to 90% of emissions in the demand response space.
Ken, is that the UK strategy you were talking about?
Yeah, I think if you look back, when I started 25 years ago, most utilities had large R&D budgets and large R&D departments, and we worked together. And I think at that time it worked well. I remember when I started, we invented the first natural gas bus. So a bus here in New York City fueled by natural gas. If you look now, pretty much every bus in the city uses natural gas. If you go to Nassau County, 100% of the fleet is natural gas. But it took a quarter century to get there. If you look at the pace of change today, I don't think you can rely on just utilities making R&D investments. You need acre. And the times I've been there, I meet with one company and they're looking at how to solve for transmission line loss. Another company is coming up with a better way to charge electric vehicles. A third company, as Angelique mentioned, has a neat little cover for radiators to both conserve the energy and then recycle it in the room. Those are the types of ideas we're seeing in the UK part of our business, and now more and more we're seeing right here in the New York part of the business. But again, it's using the utility as the backbone and then bringing in all kinds of other players to help enhance the service that we can provide.
And
May I just add,
yes, please, Gil.
add to that? Here's a prediction. I hate making predictions, but I'm going to make one. The technology investments that we will make and the infrastructure investments that we will make and the regulatory rules that we will write and implement over the next 5 to 10 years will determine what the grid will look like over the next 50 years. So that's how I believe how historic this moment in time when it comes to our industry, when it comes to our business. And what better place to reinvent and to reimagine the energy system but here in New York. The first power plant was built in New York by Thomas Edison. Consolidated Edison was a consolidation of the utilities here in New York. The first long-distance transmission of electricity occurred in Niagara Falls, from Niagara Falls to Buffalo. So it is just, I believe, the right place and the right people, all of us, to reclaim our position as the leaders in innovating this industry. So I think it's exciting times. Not all of the innovation will be driven by the utilities. In fact, it will be driven by people other than the utilities. I've heard the word Google, I have heard the word Apple, and many more. And what we need to do is to create the ecosystem so that that innovation will flourish.
And it sounds to me like part of what I'm hearing is that startups are more important than ever before because the kind of R&D budgets that existed in the middle of the 20th century when we had things like Bell Labs just don't exist in the same way for most legacy companies in industry any longer. And so it's more important for companies to partner with and support and invest in startups outside of their walls. Would you say that that's an accurate read on the energy industry, John?
Yeah, I would, but first I have to comment on Gil and making predictions. Just last week, Gil predicted to me that the Rangers were going to win the Stanley Cup.
And we were texting each other.
And I was
about
disappointed that he was wrong on that one, but I wouldn't take Gil's predictions to the bank. So I think that's very much the case. Also, when you look at what utility R&D has focused on, many times it has been addressed solving operational problems. How do you install a gas pipe without digging up a street? Better ways of doing what we currently do. And I think the small, nimble, more creative tech startups, and not necessarily startups or established firms, have an ability to add a level of creativity and innovation that really adds to the overall scene. And so I think it's very important for us to be able to take advantage of that, and that's why, you know, events like this where we collaborate are so positive.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
the other fact is that, you know, REV is in part, you know, a serious initiative by the state to chart our own future, but it's also a recognition of the fact that technology is moving at a pretty fast pace, whether we like it or not. And it's happening in ways that are well outside the traditional bounds of what energy companies are used to doing, right? So we've got whole new types of energy, right? So you've got solar and so forth, fuel cells. We've got a whole world of tech-enabled stuff, so software and controls and sensors. We've got all of a sudden, you know, things like storage and smart grid that are becoming possible. And those ideas are happening across sectors and not just in any one place. So, you know, the trick is to take advantage of that. You know, that's kind of why REV is possible, and it's also why REV is necessary. But it's clear that the time is now. And by the way, as these things unfold, the level of investment that's going to go into these new ways of doing things is going to be the market for the new technologies. And this is going to, I think the pace of that kind of change is, well, we see it happening, is going to go up, not down.
You know, one thing that I see across every industry with technology is that it's making every company, regardless of what it ever did, into a consumer-facing company, and a company that needs to be understood and loved by a consumer in a new way. And so I'm thinking about the consumer in energy, and I just want to ask a basic question. I mean, don't we just want to make sure that we have AC and our heat works, and we can flip a switch and the light comes on? What do you expect me to understand about what you guys do?
I guess I kind of think of it as there's at least three distinct groups of customers. The first are those that are very focused on their energy usage and how they meet their energy needs, and either are currently participating or would really like to participate. Then I think there's a next level where with some additional information and education and resources made available and made more attractive so they wait online outside our door for every place for the next thing, that they'll get engaged. They're not quite there yet, but with a little bit of the right information, it will catch their attention. And then there's the last group that might be less inclined to really address their own energy needs, but that there might be roles where we can aggregate them as customers and be able to also, whereas they may not be as much hands-on as some of those first two groups, we can take advantage of bringing them together with other customers, aggregate their energy usage in a way that sees many of the benefits that the first two groups will see.
Got it. Audrey.
Let me add to that. So I think of it as this way. Today, you're sort of sitting here and you're saying, you know, I don't get what's in this for me. So let me tell you a story. When I started out, and I just to sort of age myself, when I started out in this industry, it was in the end of the 80s. And we were just at the beginning of telecom deregulation. And I had a conversation with someone because the first thing that happened with the let deregulation in telecoms go, some of you may know this, some may not remember, we had operating services. We had people offering third-party operating services, and you would go to a hotel and you would call up an operator for an information. You get this humongous bill because it was unregulated, and everybody hated it. And they said, why are we deregulating the telecom companies? All we're getting is operating services, and it's not any better than anything we've ever had. What they didn't realize is that sitting there in 1988, 1989, is that in 2014 we'd have these smartphones. We have all these other communication devices that we couldn't even envision would get unleashed by allowing for deregulation and innovation to occur in the communication structure. In fact, we didn't even really have the internet back then, and it's not even that long ago. So I think my answer to you is this. You don't know yet how your experience is going to change when you have folks who really care about the fact that they can monetize the value of being able to send a price signal to your refrigerator and your refrigerator says, I'm going to pulse on and off this hour because prices are highest and Con Ed is actually paying me, and you haven't done anything differently. All you've done is maybe signed up with a vendor, and they say, look, we can guarantee you a price that's 3 cents or $100 cheaper than you would have paid if you do anything else, and you don't have to do anything differently. And you say, sign me up. And then they do everything else for you. So there are all these possibilities.
Right.
But the point is that there are going to be differentiations.
Right.
The target market is maybe a target market that today is actually still in school, and they think of things differently than we think of things. And so but the point is that we have innovators out there who have the opportunity, the technology's there, we just need to unleash it. And we need to give consumers an opportunity to get the information so you can make decisions about what you really want and what you want your experience to be.
So, Audrey, 2 things. One, 1988 is not that long ago.
Well, I don't think it's that long ago, but some
which
people
is
in this
relevant
room
to
may
think about,
think it's that long
because a lot
ago.
can happen in a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And 2, I'd like that refrigerator, so we can talk afterwards. But yeah, yeah.
Can I just add, we serve about 7 million customers here in the United States, so that means 85 million times a year we send out a bill. Another way of saying that is 85 million times a year we have an interaction with the customer. And if each time we have that interaction, we could really focus, I think, to John's point, on what those individual customers need, there's a huge opportunity. Some of them are low income. They may need budget billing or referrals to social services. Some are incredibly energy savvy, and they may be interested in thermostats or energy efficiency equipment. Some may use a dirtier form of fuel than natural gas, and it might be an opportunity to convert them from oil to gas. So it's really taking those interactions now, which are more and more electronic, and I think to Chair Zibelman's point, the younger folks are much more in tune with using technology and getting them to make decisions with the data we provide them. So even though right now you're not yet seeing the potential, I think over time, to really target the offerings to those audiences, it gives those customers, 85 million menus a year to choose from. They're not going to pick it each time, but when they do pick, it means you can tailor the service to their actual requirements.
Right. Alfred, this is a question for you, in case you're feeling left out down there. So the term market transformation has been used to describe New York Green Bank's activity in the private lending space. Can you explain what this means and how New York Green Bank is working to accomplish it?
Sure. So with market transformation, it's one of our 3 key investment criteria for any transaction. And in everything we do, we're working with the private sector to help break down financing barriers. The first question we ask is, do we need to be involved? If the market is being efficiently financed on a purely private basis, then the answer to that is probably no. The answer is yes, we do need to be involved because there's not an active and liquid market out there. The next question we ask is, what specifically is our role? Is there the opportunity for real scale here in the marketplace? And, what do we think is going to happen over the coming time period? And for particular sectors, those time periods may be different. But what do we think is going to happen such that the private market will step into our shoes? In some cases, it may be greater scale, such that there's more transaction volume, such that the private sector will embrace. It may be a little more history. It may be helping incubate new structures so that it's not such a heavy lift for the private sector versus other opportunities they have where there's a very clear roadmap. So that's how we think about market transformation, and anything we do will be things in which we think that the private market will ultimately step into our shoes.
So what have you seen as some of the financing barriers to innovators entering the clean energy markets?
Well, it's a great question, and in the distributed market, which is what a lot of this conversation here today and this week is about, you have complicated financing structures. You often have, instead of a straight loan, you have a PPA or a lease contract or an energy savings arrangement. You have multiple risks. When you have a power purchase agreement or an energy savings arrangement, you not only have the counterparty credit risk, will they pay when they're obligated to pay, but then you have the question, well, will they be obligated to pay because will the project perform? So you have that analysis you have to do. You oftentimes, in these sectors we're discussing, you have new counterparty credits. Instead of a utility as a PPA off-taker, you may have a building or a commercial enterprise, a homeowner. And those are new credits for financiers to get their hands around. And I think, lenders in this space and investors in this space are capable of understanding and putting structure around those types of transactions. But a major hurdle here is in distributed generation, it's fragmented and you have small transaction sizes. If you have a large utility scale transaction that's $500 million, $1 billion, bankers, if there's an answer, they'll figure out that answer. But in a fragmented market, it's more difficult to make all that work worthwhile. So what's the answer there? It's typically standardization. If you think about auto loans and credit card portfolios and so forth, those asset classes are very standardized. And I think it's fair to say that in a lot of cases, resi rooftop has become standardized, but that's about it. So that's a barrier. And then there's a question of, well, if you build it, will they come? If a lender or a banker or an investor is to standardize an asset class, put the thought into structuring around that, will they come? There's a chicken and egg question of, the developers say only if they had the financing they could do so many projects, and the lenders say if only we had some supply of projects we could do the financing. So you have that question too. Also, a point John made earlier that a lot of these solutions are not coming from any particular industry. They're coming from across many industries. And within a bank, that can actually not be helpful because you don't have a clear sponsor for a particular transaction. So if you think about the bankers that are typically diving into the space and really focusing on the space, they oftentimes are within, say, a power group or a utility group. Well, in a lot of cases, your sponsor here may be a technology company, it may be an industrial like an ESCO, it may be a specialty finance company, and the banker looking at it actually is supposed to be working with utility companies. So you can get a little bit of, you wind up with a lack of sponsorship in that regard, and the same is true on the product side. In distributed generation, where it's all about portfolios of transactions, you get into many questions. Is it a securitization to be done out of an asset-backed group, or is it a project financing to be done out of a project group, or is it a lease to be done out of the leasing group? All those things sort of cloud the ability to have real sponsorship. And what the Green Bank seeks to do is to help overcome those barriers, and that can be in terms of providing credit enhancement to make transactions an easier lift from a credit perspective. It can be in terms of providing aggregation capital to help companies demonstrate that scale, and it can be in terms of promoting standardization so that we can access those institutional markets.
Alfred, that list of barriers is not exactly short. Took you a few minutes to get through it all. So Angelique, I'll turn to you as the startup representative on the panel. Why then even go at this one, and how? What do you see as the barriers?
Well, one of the reasons why REV is so progressive and exciting for entrepreneurs is because it is so markets-driven, and we're very excited and expect a lot of new access to capital based on bridging the gap between lenders and, green banks. Lost that one for a second there, sitting next to me. So between the green bank, lenders, and the policymakers, this bridging the gap together is going to really open up capital for entrepreneurs. As an entrepreneur, it's not only difficult and challenging to access capital markets because being in such an energy and capital intensive industry, but also based on all of the other exciting, sexy sectors that are out there, it's been difficult to attract capital to the energy clean tech space based on the policy being so fragmented and so highly regulated. So with everything being brought together now, this is a lot of new opportunities for entrepreneurs.
So working together is critical, partnership is critical. John, I'll call on you. How will New York Green Bank and NYSERDA work together on the deployment of clean energy projects?
Beautifully.
Seamless.
Second prediction of the evening.
Well, so, well, we're going to work together closely. We actually inhabit the same space. You know, we can, Alfred and I can see each other when we're at our desks here in the city. But more substantively, we do have, and will continue to have, because we work on these things together, a shared perspective on what's viable, what can actually make sense, you know, in terms of a technology that can work or a project that can perform. We're going to have a shared agenda on generating projects that, from our point of view, can advance investment in clean energy, and from the Green Bank's point of view, can be you know, the stream of projects that they work on and provide financing to and solve barriers for. And this is actually, I think, maybe one of the biggest prizes. As we do these projects and as we do these together, we're going to be accumulating a lot of information about the world, about what makes a good project, what makes a bad project, where there's penetration, where there's not penetration, what's good performance, what's not good performance. And that availability of information is going to be market animating, because all of a sudden you can kind of go, oh, that's where the there is, or now I know what good is, now I know, you know, I thought I was in the front of the pack, but I realize that others are beating me to it. And I think we're going to have a division of labor in some respects. You know, Alfred and the Green Bank, they're not in the business of making subsidies, right? They're in the business of transforming markets. You know, under the right conditions, NYSERDA is going to provide support that looks like a subsidy, that's a bridge to get to somewhere. So we're going to play a different role. We're going to be, you know, at a different place in the spectrum. And we're going to work together on non-financial barriers that kind of get in the way of animating the market.
Got it. Anything you want to add, Alfred?
I agree, and there are a number of examples where we've, certainly from a Green Bank's perspective, benefited from the NYSERDA network and originating transaction ideas and such.
So this is just a 5-minute warning for our question askers in the audience. I've got one more question, then we're going to turn to you, so begin to warm up and incubate your questions. Let's talk about workforce development. According to PwC, 30% of utility employees are eligible for retirement in the next 5 years. This is a question for anyone who wants to take it. How are you preparing to attract, train, and motivate their replacements?
I will take it. It is true. In the utilities here in New York State, we probably have about between 30,000 and 40,000 employees, of which, you know, around average 35–40% are retirement eligible over the next 5 years. And if there's one thing that keeps me up at night, it's those statistics. At NYPA, this is our #1 priority, is how do we manage succession planning? How do we manage knowledge management? And how do we improve and really reinvent processes in our utility? Because the workforce of the future will be different. With all the technology that will be ushered in our industry, our requirements of skill sets and mix of skill sets are going to be radically different. And so this is an area that we are putting a lot of time, a lot of resources. You know, most new employees do not come to the New York Power Authority and say, I want to work for the Power Authority over the next 30 years and get my pension, my state pension. So it's a different, so we anticipate a lot more churn, and we need to manage that. That's going to be not only a challenge, but actually an opportunity. So how do we change that challenge into an opportunity is one thing that we've been working on. This is not a new issue for us. I'm sure John McAvoy and Ken Daly can echo that we've known the demographics of the workforce in the utility industry, and we've been addressing it for quite some time now.
Let me just add something. I'll let John. So I'd like to turn this a little bit to why I think one of the reasons what's so important we're doing this. We have an opportunity in New York to really create an energy sector that goes far and beyond what people think about as a traditional utility industry. And quite frankly, I think that by looking at how to change things up, we can do a few things. One is that we can make utilities a very exciting and dynamic place to work. And if you think about, how people sort of flooded the technology industry before, because then you couldn't even get somebody to study power engineering because it seems so old school, is it starts to become new school because that becomes the enabling force for a lot of these changes. And so you essentially, the industry itself becomes exciting. But the other thing is that by making New York the center of focus for really where things are going to change, I think we also have an opportunity to create a huge amount of green jobs, not only in what we think about traditionally as energy efficiency and solar installation, but really around manufacturing and technology and the capability to do this, because we're creating now a market. Mm-hmm. And so, to me, one of the opportunities we have with REV is not only making the system more efficient and therefore better for users, but it actually is creating a new generation of an energy economy that if we do it right, so many people look at New York and not only nationally but internationally and really become an attractive place for people to host their businesses and really become the center for a lot of the vertical cities and a lot of the large older countries to say, well, these are the kind of goods we need. So part of it is why this all hangs together is you have the utilities obviously looking to change their ways. We have Green Bank and NYSERDA looking at how to fund this new innovation. But in the end, what we have is the state really interested in reducing bills, making the system reliable, but also growing the economy around energy that's beyond simply the utility industry, but the overall economy. And I think all of this gets wrapped up in recognizing that the technology's here. We just need to change the way we do business to enable it.
So you're really talking about building an ecosystem.
Absolutely.
So what does that look like day to day in your job, John, as you're managing Con Edison? How are you managing the next generation of talent?
So let me add a little bit about our strategies on this, and Gil touched on some parts of it. We've had approaches that included succession planning, knowledge management, attraction and retention, as well as a really advanced learning center in Queens on Vernon Boulevard that has really helped us live through what we've already seen is several generations of turnover. Frankly, they've been very successful for us. Where we're seeing a bit of a hole now is what's somewhat called in the mid-level of education. And it's something that National Grid and Con Ed decided to partner on together a few years ago. We sponsored the Energy Tech High School in Queens. And it's part of the overall P-Tech movement, just really starting in New York City, but I think we're really optimistic about it. I think it has a lot to offer. Students who enroll there, public school, fully free. Students who enroll for 6 years, 4-year high school diploma and then a 2-year associate degree. And they take a curriculum that was developed by National Grid and us working together that focuses and prepares them for a career in the energy markets. And it includes some parts of power engineering, but it also includes a lot of innovation and new technologies so that they will be the workers of tomorrow, not the workers of yesterday. So I think we'll see that, frankly, I am highly confident that Energy Tech is going to be a success story. I think we're going to look for more opportunities like that.
Ken, you look like you have something to add before we hit the audience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the challenge is most utilities and the workers we have, they've been there pretty much as long as I have, 25 years. They're my age. Another way of saying that is they're getting old, older by the day. And it's really a new world, and when we look 5 to 10 years, we do see the need for more and more workers coming in. The challenge is when John goes out to a school, or when I go out to school, you don't yet see as many students interested in the STEM disciplines, science and technology and engineering and mathematics. And if you think about who the future of utilities and the energy place, it's not people my age, it's people my kids' age, high school, middle school, and grammar school. And I think for each age, you really need a different targeted approach. So for all line workers, students who are in high school today, we have programs in Buffalo and Albany and Syracuse where they can go take an associate's degree and for 2 years learn how to climb a pole, learn how to work on an electric line, and get a real job, an excellent job as a line worker. For high schools, I think you heard from John, first ever high school being opened up in New York City, Energy Tech. Years ago, we did courses and then curriculum. Today, we're opening up high schools for energy studies. But the real answer is the middle schools. For whatever reason, particularly here in the States, at around 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, the students lose interest. They have so many competing priorities. One of the programs we're real excited about is we're partnering with a high school, Bjorklund Tech High School, which is already a leader in STEM. We're using them as a magnet to attract middle school students into the engineering field, into the math field. Really, it starts at that young of an age, grammar school, middle school, so that by the time many of us do retire, there's a real pipeline of folks who are interested in STEM disciplines. And it's not just enough to get out to a school now. You have to, as John mentioned, actually open a school, or it really won't happen without industry support.
Right. Anybody else? Yeah, Gil.
If I could just add, it really, as you've heard, requires multiple strategies. I'll give you a couple of examples. Under Governor Cuomo's leadership, we started a collaboration amongst all of the utilities in New York State. We're calling it Troops to Energy Jobs. So all of our veterans coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan, we are finding a pathway to train them and to get them into the energy industry. That's one strategy that we've been working collaboratively. Another thing, I think a great example, John McAvoy mentioned, the Learning Center. NYPA, in partnership with National Grid and NYSEG in upstate New York, we are planning to build a workforce development center in Western New York so that we have these centers in various parts of our state to really prepare potential employees, and not just in the utility, but in the energy sector, as Audrey mentioned. It's really a bigger pie than just utility. It's the energy space. And you heard it first here from Audrey. We are cool.
On that note, it's time to turn to all of you. So we've got a lot of questions. Where is our mic runner? Great. So we'll start with this one right at the end. If you can just wait for the microphone and give us your name before you ask your question.
Hi, my name is Bob Wyman. It's wonderful to hear people talk about efficiency, cleaner production of energy, et cetera. But I was recently very concerned looking at the New York State energy plan because its #1 metric seemed to be keeping electricity bills low and even driving them lower, which seems to be the exact opposite of what we should be doing. When I look into the future, 10, 20, 30 years out, I see that every gallon of gasoline that we use today should be revenue for the electricity business. Every gallon of heating oil, every therm of gas which is burned should be electrically driven ground source heat pumps or other technologies. What we should be doing, it seems to me, is figuring out not just how we make a more efficient electricity industry, but how we make an electricity industry which is capable of producing vastly more electricity than it does today. It worries me so much when we focus so much on how do we reduce production when it seems to me that we should be dramatically increasing production to eliminate point-of-use fossil fuel burning. Why is it that the only thing we seem to be talking about is efficiency and ease of use and not how do we produce dramatically more electricity?
Thank you. Who would like to field that?
Well,
John.
so the state energy plan that I read is one that is about all the goals that we have in mind, including affordability, as you mentioned, reliability, resilience, dynamic, flexible, customer-centric, and clean. And I think that it's, the central strategy behind getting to affordability is that we are going to do the things that reduce energy use, so energy efficiency. We're going to find ways to accelerate clean energy so that we so we get that to be competitive. We are going to innovate with solutions like demand response and storage and microgrids that help solve the load control problems and help provide resilience and so forth. So it's pretty clear to us as we've thought these things through that the goals that you see as being in opposition are in fact pretty much aligned. We're going to get to affordability by getting to system efficiency, energy efficiency, distributed solutions, innovation, investment, and by harnessing the competitive engine of the private sector to help us do that. I don't think these things are at odds.
Thank you. Another question. Let's see. I don't want to isolate only the front of the room here, so I'm going to go all the way back. Can we send our microphone to the gentleman in the tan jacket? If you could give us your name and organization.
Hi, Nicholas Eisenberger, Pure Energy Partners. First of all, Angelique, thanks for pulling this conversation together. It's great to see this collection of leaders up there. Audrey, what you're doing with that docket's amazing, and John and Alfred and the utility leaders as well. As audacious as I think New York's plan is coming together to be, I think there's a sense we need to move faster. So I was interested to see if anyone has any ideas that haven't been mentioned for how we can do that. How can we connect innovators and entrepreneurs to big utility infrastructure more rapidly in New York?
Who would like to begin with that one? Gil.
Well, how many here knows about the New York Power Authority? I see a raise of hand. Oh, enough. So, the New York Power Authority is unique in the sense that if you look at our history, we've been asked to step into a unique energy need of our state, whether it's building the large hydros back in the late 50s and 60s, all the way to building the transmission system of the state. We believe that customer empowerment is here. We believe that renewables are reality, and that distributed resources is just going to continue to expand. And we know that we need to invest and modernize our grid to accommodate the changes. We know that innovation will have to happen in regulation. That's happening in a big way in New York under Audrey's leadership. We know that all of these things that we're doing have to be integrated into our planning and operations. And we know that codes and standards will have to be developed, communication, interconnection standards. So at NYPA, what you will see from us is we will be doing a lot of these things. You will see a dozen or so initiatives where we will work with companies, private companies, to try and test and see what we learn, and that will inform the entire one of the things that inform the regulatory process. So that's how we're going to be interacting.
Let me just add, I think, and I'll just throw this out to the whole audience. Don't think of REV as sort of the start of something new. If you have something that you want to do, NYSERDA's open for business, Green Bank's open for business, we're open for business, bring it forward, because, and even all our utilities are actually looking and grappling with opportunities to do things. We have, as you know, a major initiative that the state has launched around community microgrids. We have a lot of things going on. REV is really a way for us to make this systemic and throughout the system is sustainable. So it's not project driven, it's fundamental change driven. But in the meantime, we're trying to get as much experience as we can, as quickly as we can, so that we can learn from it. So please don't stop yourself from coming forward and saying, I have an idea. Well, we're all here to see you get it done.
So,
absolutely.
So let's get another couple of questions in here. Right there. Where's our mic? Right up here.
Hi, my name's Manish Kapoor. So Audrey, I'm going to borrow your iPhone analogy because everyone listens when you talk about iPhones.
So true.
So the question is, similar to the iPhone ecosystem, in the utility space, the cost of new entrants is becoming close to zero, where you don't necessarily need to have baseload power plants, etc. So when you see players like Nest, O-Power, etc., which are doing what a utility may have done, say, even 10 years ago, what do you see the utility, such as a Con Ed, looking like in 10 years? So does the graded value added become generating power? Does it become distributing power? Or it's similar to, for example, the New York Stock Exchange, we don't derive most of your revenue from trading and listing fees, but mainly from selling data to other people. So can you talk a little bit more about how do you see utilities evolving, given you have competition from a lot more players down the road?
Sure. So our decision to talk about this not as Utility 2.0, but actually talk about the utility as the distribution system platform provider, really was a deliberate choice of recognizing that in the future, the role of the utility should be not just to be the wires company, but to be that platform company. So just like in all markets are really are foundational to them is data and information. So really thinking about the utility is evolving from just operating the system to really as a service provider that supports the integration of these resources and potentially and uses them, operationalizes them so that the system itself becomes more productive, so that it is heavily data intensive, it's technology intensive, and becomes really both a asset developer, because you still are going to need some backbone physical systems, but an operator using technology and information to do innovation. And then in that context is also a service provider and gets and actually is rewarded for the value that they provide as services. So and it is very much a combination of, if you think about it, the stock exchange, which is helping monetize the services, and providing the information back so they can be valued back on the system. So it's both of those pieces. And it's, to me, a very dynamic change.
So we have time for one more question, and we'll take it right here. Mike behind you.
My name is Bram Reijners. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm from Alliander, the grid operator and gas operator of Amsterdam. So we are in the same boat as a National Grid and Edison. And we were here with a team of 20 people, and we were there this afternoon with Acre. And we saw all these wonderful startups. And I was thinking how my colleagues here in New York are working with Acre and all these startups. Just for us also to learn how we can copy that in the Netherlands.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great comment. And I'd love to have, let's see, one more question. So we have the time right behind you.
Thank you. Mitch Stein with Butterfly. I have an interesting question. Jessi, you made an interesting comment where you said somebody would come into a room, turn on a switch, and they would have the lights on, and they'd have no idea how much their electricity was costing them to turn that on. And I appreciate everybody talking here about the very high level with the smart grid and with the changes and so forth that we must do over the next 10, 20, 30 years. But bringing it down to a really consumer level, and I would talk about the consumer that is in an office, the office worker, or even the CEO or CFO of many companies, even here in New York. How do we actually, what do you see as far as changing human behavior? How do we get them to really actively want to change? I know a lot of top management people will say we need an energy efficiency initiative, and they'll put out a directive for their company, but yet they won't follow it. They'll demand that their employees and the workers will take care of it. But you know,
So,
other
so
than
you're
controls,
asking a
how do
really
we do
deep
that?
question as our last question, which is how do you get people to change?
Thank you.
So I think, and it was actually similar to the other question. So first of all, you have to get information. People need to understand the true cost of how they use energy, and they need to recognize that if they have the information in front of them, that they will change behavior. So part of the problem we have in the industry is that most people don't know anything until they see the bill at the end of the month. And quite frankly, folks, that's not even what you used the last month. It's probably sometimes what you used 1 month prior or 2 months prior. So we have a real lag on information. So one of the things that we're looking at in REV is how do you change it so people get information. And then the other piece, which is what a big piece of what we need to think about, is there's 2 ways to motivate behavior. One is people feel, you penalize folks, so if you use electricity at the wrong time, you end up paying a lot more. The other is to reward folks, is that if you shift your usage, you get paid, and so you get credited or revenue. And so one of the things that, I believe fundamentally, but we're going to be dealing with in the docket, is how do we change how people pay for electricity? So one is they have information, so they understand it better, in a way that they want to see it. Some people want to see it, some people don't. And the other is how do you provide a system of rewards and get the customers to understand. And we always talk about the mass market, but I can guarantee you there are customers out there who pay billions of dollars of years or millions in energy, and they get it, they pay attention to it. But the point is that how do we create it so that, for example, if your utility sent you a check at the end of the month and said, because you did A, B, and C, you earned this much money, would it be an easier way then to change behavior than if you were penalized? And so we're going to be working at all of that, but a big piece of this is for people to see real time, hell, if I do A, I have a much better effect on what I want to have an effect on.
Let me just jump in. The other thing about REV is that, obviously it's enlisting a lot of other actors who are going to be pretty good at figuring out how to market their services. And we know for a fact that there are different hooks that get people to be interested in energy efficiency, right? So sometimes it's bill savings, but for some people it's comfort, for some people it's health, right? So asthma reduction, for some people it's part and parcel of the home improvement. And we also know that that it's easier to do energy efficiency or other things that would happen in a building if you can slipstream it into something that they're already doing. So commercial office space, tenant fit out time, let's go do something. Time to replace a piece of equipment, let's go do something. And the more you can kind of fit it into what's already going on, the more you'll get people to sort of agree to it because it's good for them, not on a one-off, I've got to make you pay attention to something you don't want to pay attention to basis. And the magic is if we can have savvy people who are thinking that they're going to build a business by serving customers well, they're going to do that thinking for us, right? It doesn't have to be, someone back at the ranch trying to figure something out, someone 3 intermediaries away. It's someone who's going to make a living off it. And we know that is a really promising line.
So we've heard about a lot of things tonight. We've had a very rich dialogue. We've heard a lot about building markets. We've heard a lot about how to educate a future workforce to build an ecosystem of talent. We've heard a lot about the fast pace of technology. And with that, we've heard from our audience that there is a need to move faster. And to that, we have a message, which is don't wait, move. I know right now that we are the only folks standing between you and the drinks. So I'd like to thank our panelists and invite you all to join us for a reception.